Oi, pessoal, boa tarde. Só checando aqui, se alguém puder me dar um ok para me dizer se está tudo bem, se vocês estão me ouvindo. Que eu não estou vendo aqui o chat do YouTube. Deixa eu dar uma olhadinha aqui. Ah, parece que sim. Ok, então, pessoal, como a gente tinha combinado, já tinha falado, então, boa tarde, obrigada, Gustavo. Então, eu estou aqui com o Chris Moller, né? Ele é um arquiteto da Nova Zelândia, que eu conheci, encontrei nos anos 90, na Inglaterra. Ele foi de Nova Zelândia para a Europa, viajou muito por lá e produziu bastante, tem toda uma história, né, de projetos vencedores, né, ganhou vários prêmios, uma pessoa bastante ativa e que tem toda uma pegada também com o ensino. Ele foi professor da Architecture Association e tem um trabalho com estudantes. Eu mesmo participei de um workshop que ele liderou, no início dos anos 2000. É uma pessoa que eu admiro muito e muito, assim, principalmente pela generosidade com que ele encara a arquitetura, né? E aí eu fiquei pensando que nessa rodada que a gente está fazendo de conversas de TCC e TCC, seria muito interessante ter ele aqui. É o que a gente vai fazer, né? Ele vai falar em inglês e eu vou interromper às vezes para fazer um resumo em português e depois eu vou organizar para que a gente possa legendar o vídeo para ficar ainda mais fácil, tá bom? E eu gostaria, assim, de chamar a atenção para vocês, eu estava até conversando com ele agora sobre isso, que o que eu acho muito importante no trabalho dele, que eu acho que eu chamo atenção para a importância de olhar isso, é como ele usa a questão do conceito e das visões de mundo dele, né? Inclusive de referências de fora da arquitetura, dentro do projeto dele de uma maneira muito coerente, né? E muito rigorosa. Então, acho que é muito interessante a gente ver isso, porque eu acho que essa relação conceitual é o que dá, muitas vezes, o caráter de um projeto e a sua qualidade também. Tá bom? Então, eu vou convidar o Chris aqui. So, Chris, hello. You are live now, and you cannot see them, but you have my students. They are finishing school right now. They are doing their graduate project. So as I told you, the idea was to share a little bit your experience in architecture with them and motivate them in these difficult times that we all have been through. And I think that we have to recover energy and continue. So I will pass you the word, and from time to time I'm going to interrupt you just to translate a little bit, okay?
Bom dia.
Bom dia.
Thank you, Clarissa. It's lovely to have this connection again with Brazil. It's a great privilege and a lovely thing to do, as you say, in this time.
Thank you. It's we, in the name of our school, that thank you for your disponibility to be here with us. Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to leave now, but I'm just there listening to you.
Okay. So I'm going to try. Greetings, everybody. Bom dia. I'm going to try and see if I can get this series of slides up so that you can see them. And while I'm doing that, I'll talk a little bit about this. You can probably hear in the background a little bit of music. This is ambient music from Brian Eno. It's kind of my crazy morning ritual, if you like. The other thing I wanted to say is a little something about this cup, because it was made from a very good friend of mine who lives over the hill, and everything is done by him. He's now in his mid-70s, old friend of mine. He's been doing the making of pots since 1970. So, gosh, that's 50 odd years. But he grows the trees. He cuts the trees. He mixes the clay. He makes the pot. And then he glazes the pot. And it goes into his own wood-fired kiln that he also made. So the entire cycle of the material and the process is him, and it's all direct. It's faster than a 3D printer, much faster. It's faster than McDonald's. You get a dozen of these in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. He makes them that fast.
Chris.
And the reason I find it interesting is because for an architect, it's a little bit more like going back to medieval time. So it's less about your personal identity and creative individuality, and more about doing something useful for others.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm going to try to translate a little bit to them, and then I think I'm going to stick to try to translate for writing the comments, but just to give a general idea of what you are saying. Então, gente, o Chris ele está mostrando esse copo, né, e está trazendo para a gente esse momento dele, né, que a gente, na verdade, está acordando ele muito cedo, porque o fuso horário daqui para Nova Zelândia é bem grande, então ele está assim de manhã, são 7 e poucas da manhã, e ele falou que ele tem todos os dias, ele é um pouco um ritual também criativo, né? Ele sempre escuta Brian Eno e toma café nessa xícara, que para ele é muito importante, esse copo de cerâmica. E ele quis compartilhar essa experiência desse copo, porque para ele traduz muita coisa sobre a arquitetura que ele está buscando. Então, esse copo é feito por um amigo dele que mora também ali nas montanhas, na Nova Zelândia, não muito longe de onde ele mora, e que eu entendi que era desde os anos 50, mas depois eu vejo direitinho com ele, mas assim, faz muitos anos, ele vive de maneira totalmente sustentável. Então, ele plantou as próprias árvores do lugar, ele cuida e produz da produção até do barro com que ele vai trabalhar essas peças. Ele faz tudo, do início ao fim. E ele falou que ele produz esses objetos com uma rapidez muito maior do que qualquer impressora 3D e qualquer McDonald's jamais poderiam atingir. Ele disse que em coisa de 5 minutos ele consegue fazer 10 copos dele, até mais. Então, ele queria trazer essa ideia dessa busca por essa vida mais integrada à natureza, né? Essa ideia daquilo que é totalmente sustentável, né? E que ainda assim tem uma alta produtividade, que é alguma coisa que ele vem perseguindo na arquitetura. Ok, Chris. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm going to try and do, it doesn't seem to be uploading this time. Let's see if this works. Can you see the slides? There we go. So what I want to talk to you about today is the idea of ambient vibration, a little bit like Brian Eno, a little bit like this. I also often talk about isn't-ness, the idea of moving towards something that is not. And a good example of it is the cup is not the thing that you're interested in, even though the cup is important and useful. The real thing that is most important is what is not. That's where the coffee is. So it's the space that is, or at least isn't, and allows the coffee to be poured into the cup, and therefore you can drink it, because it isn't. So the cup isn't important, the space is. And I think that's really essential to architecture.
Chris, just don't worry, because I'm managing to write in Portuguese in the comments, so you can just go. If I see that I'm lost in my writing, I will ask you to to talk again. Okay.
Lovely. And I'll try and talk slowly.
Okay, it's perfect. I think it's perfect.
Words. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
lovely.
you.
This is a slide from Bruce Mell, from his exhibition and his book called Massive Change. And I think it captures the spirit of the time we're currently in brilliantly, because everything is changing. And as he says, it's not about the world of design, it's about the design of the world. And that's really what we need to be dealing with here. All the crises, the environmental crises, the human crises, the tragedies that are happening around the world at the moment are huge challenges. And that's why it's so important that designers embrace, if you like, this bigger picture. And in a way, the idea of being focused on what is useful for other people and other species, even for the planet. So how can we navigate through these times? And I'm a sailor myself, so not for nothing that I have an image here of a yacht. And I think what's lovely about sailing is it's not direct. You use natural energies which enable you to move and navigate in very different ways. This is an example from the Vendée Globe, which is the big international solo sailing race around the planet, non-stop. And what you can see here is all the boats represented by the different colored dots on the screen. And what's really fascinating is that even though they're trying to be, take the most efficient route to be the fastest, of course, they're somewhere between extremes of the further south you go, the stronger the winds, and you might break your mast or your gear. Also, there are, great big, huge flows of ice in the water. So those are dangers. The further north you go, the wind gets less, and therefore you're not as fast. So there's this band of human agreement almost between these extremes. So there's something about that we can navigate through uncertainty by exploring all these things. Evolution of type is fascinating. These two cars, the one on the right is a 1930s Ford. The one on the left is the Dymaxion car that Buckminster Fuller designed. And his car uses a chassis that he borrowed from Ford, the same engine, the same tank of fuel. But because of the shape, it can go 4 times further. It's using less energy. The same tank of fuel enables you to go 4 times further. Also, because of the shape, it can carry many more people. And the car on the right, the Ford, I think can carry 4 or 5 people. The one on the left, more like about 10 or 11. Although I have seen a video where there are as many as almost 20, I think, coming out of it. So type is really, really important. And nature shows that to us in a very efficient way. And this graph I'm showing you along the bottom is showing the hardware going from fixed hardware to flexible hardware effectively from the nautilus, which is a creature that has been living in the ocean for millions of years, all the way up to the octopus, which is very, very flexible. And the stepping stones that you can see between the two other creatures, the first one is a cuttlefish, which has the introduction of an intelligent skin on the outside of the shell. I'm just going to turn Brian off because it might be easier to hear. Thanks, Brian. And this shift from a strategy of survival from a shell that protects you, this is the basic architecture, and the mouth that works as a motor to move around, that's the nautilus at the beginning on the left. Then the cuttlefish introduces a new architecture, this intelligent skin around the shell, but hasn't thrown away the old architecture. So the shell to protect the creature is still there. The next step that you can see is a squid. That's the third circle that you can see. And the squid has reduced the protective shell right down to just the vital organs. And this enables a third development to happen. So the squid can move all of its tentacles and arms and even start to imitate other things around it. So there's a higher level of intelligence, and it's the software, if you like, or the intelligence that I mentioned that is the vertical axis on the chart. So you're going from simple software to very complex software. But the final one is the octopus, and the octopus has no shell. So the intelligence is very high level. It's physically very flexible, and it can adapt and change. So you've gone from effectively a very simple creature that can survive through carrying a protection shell around, through to a very active or interactive player that is very dynamic and flexible. And I think there are some clues in there about where architecture can go to. So how could we begin? And this is a photo of my son playing with his Lego at age 4, I think. He's not 4 anymore. he's moved on, so he's doing all sorts of things, and who knows what he'll get up to, but he's drawing like crazy. And I think that the next slide shows, you know, maybe one of the big clues is a little bit like the cup, you know, what is absolutely necessary, even what isn't necessary. This is the prototype to a very early people's car, the Citroen 2CV. And you can see there's only one headlight. That's all they needed at the beginning. And there's only one windscreen wiper. And there's many things in here which are, it's almost the ultimate minimal car. And I find it also a beautiful illustration, the curve that you can see of the corrugated metal. And it's curved, of course, because when you bend structure, that strengthens it. You know, if you explore with paper, you know, very thin, very light, but if you give it a curve, you can see it starts to gain strength and stiffness. And it's that I want to talk about. In parallel with the philosophy of David Henry Thoreau, who wrote a beautiful book called Walden. And it was all about him being in tune with nature and learning to live with all the other creatures so that we're sharing this planet together. This is not just about humans. This is about the entire family of species that live on this planet, whether we're plants, fish, birds, mammals, insects, everything. So now what you're seeing is a bundle of these, you know, the floppy paper that I just picked up. And you can see how lacking in strength it is. But when you make a series of little cuts, you can see like this, then it enables you to explore and begin a kind of weaving. And that's what I mean, I suppose, when I'm talking about vibration, because to me, everything is about vibration, you know, the coming and going of the tide, the sun coming up and going down, the seasons, all of that. So a bunch of these floppy things woven together starts to create a substrate, even something. No, I can even hold it up. It has strength in itself that enables you to create space and structure, and through that, of course, light. Slightly less floppy paper. These are small, thin skins of plywood, and that you can connect them together, like when you're weaving, in warps and wefts. But the idea of bending is really interesting to me as a kind of physics. And when you weave them together, you can start to do things like this. So these are post-tensioned against the strong verticals that are in compression. So these are in tension and these are in compression, and these are bent and curved and very subtle S-curves or sine curves. Oops, too fast. So I kind of see it like ambient vibrations when you, I sometimes refer to it as spatial sketching. And you're sketching literally in space with structure, with compression and tension. And then the question is how to grow it up, how to make it viable as habitation, and how to weave these fabrications together, and even to a degree make more of them. And of course, the use of paper or wood is a very renewable material, and something that I think is very beautiful and poetic. And even that this weaving that you're doing is not just, you know, the thing itself, it's also, excuse me, it's also weaving with the plants, it's weaving with the site. So there's this idea of embracing the differences of the places of where you build. That through weaving, you're vibrating in tune with nature. And it's kind of like this, you know. So we should really be saying namaste, which in Indian means I see you. To create a very minimum habitat, but something you can really live in, like Thoreau and his hut. Just 10 square meters. 10. But if you really want to build a house that is maybe a little bit more viable for people that might struggle with only 10. We did this house for a woman close by, which is the 10 that you can see there, and that was her sitting in front of it, and then an extra 30, which I'll show you. So in total, it's just 40 square meters. Here's the site. It's shared with her father's house, which is at the front. So this is a little valley that sits down behind his house. So you can see that here compared to his own house, which is on the site. And you can see that the 10 square meters is effectively her bedroom and study, which has a little link that connects through to the kitchen and the bathroom. Then the eating and dining, as well as the laundry, and then the living space. And that all opens out onto a deck and the front lawn. This shows you the layers of structure and the weaving and how we fabricated all of the pieces, which you saw in the factory earlier. And this is what it looks like finished. So you're looking through this ambient woven vessel, and it's very different than building out of beton or concrete. And it's also very different than building with stick frame, where all the timber is much thicker and just straight. It's more like a woven basket. And you have to teach the builders, the fabricators, to weave. So here's looking back the other way. That's the kitchen in front, and then the studio bedroom at the back. And here it is on the outside with its deck and everything. Literally, this was taken on the day that it was completed. So you can see things are still very basic. But it's the idea of a minimum habitat. But what about workspace? Well, we were asked by a scientific lab and a bunch of PhD students, could we make something with this crazy idea for their control laboratory for all their work spaces, which are down in this big factory. So we made this very simple 20 square meter thing that then is on stilts. So you can see it's hovering in the air with a stair up to it, and just very minimum wrapped in polycarbonate. And here it is, here's their workspace, so that they can then look out over the various work laboratory stations that are in progress and write up their experiments in the office. And here are the guys in the factory making all the pieces and then weaving the pieces together and lifting them into place. Or what about learning environments? And again, it's the same kind of idea. That so what you start to see is this is not a solution for housing. It's a way of thinking about structure and space, about tension and compression. So the thought that you make this series of ingredients which create structure, but the structure has holes in it, and where the holes are is useful. So what you're seeing there is also the idea that the walls become furniture. You know, they're shelving, they enable you to store things or to sit or do other things. It's not just the external cladding and the structure. And here's a little girl playing with one of these inside the bigger one at an exhibition. I want to move now onto a different project, but the essential idea of vibration and of weaving is there, and how we can weave sustainably. So this idea of then going to a commercial scale building or in this case, a community building that is in Christchurch, where we had the big earthquakes that destroyed the city. And I had to sit down and think about, gosh, the building types, the way that we build, the weight of the buildings that we use is kind of crazy. And the damage that the materials and the processes we use is also kind of crazy. Can't we do these things in a much more sustainable, a lighter way, so that it's more like a boat? It's really hovering in tune with the land. So this idea of the Mount Pleasant Community Centre, which we won in a competition, and I turned up with, gosh, I could go and get it for you. That would be funny, wouldn't it? My airplane ticket, which I folded up. I'll see if I can find it for you. 2 seconds.
Gente, ele foi pegar se não me engano, ticket com o qual ele fez essa tecedura, essa dobradura. Ele foi lá buscar, pediu para a gente esperar um pouco. E nesse meio tempo eu pergunto para vocês se está funcionando essa coisa de eu fazer as legendas como comentário, se está dando para ajudar, ou se vocês preferem às vezes que eu fale. Podem falar lá pelos comentários, tá? Enquanto ele vem. É porque eu achei que se eu ficasse interrompendo ele toda hora, perderia o ritmo, né? Mas aproveitando que ele foi buscar a dobradura. Sim, o que? Gustavo, só para eu entender que sim, tá ok eu fazer assim, traduzindo nos comentários? É isso? Tá ótimo, então. Legendagem em real time, gente. Eu tô que nem o produtor de copos de cerâmica aqui. Tá bom. Tá, pois é, eu também achei. Ok, gente. Então vamos só aguardar, dar um tempinho para vocês, enquanto ele procura o papel. Só para falar que eu esqueci de falar isso, enquanto ele não vem, o Chris ele já veio ao Brasil, né? Acho que eu falei rapidamente, né? Ele participou de um workshop de projetos para o Morro da Providência, andou aqui bastante pelo Rio de Janeiro, então ele conhece um pouco assim o nosso universo também. Então eu vou sair um pouquinho enquanto a gente espera ele, tá? Great.
I guess
Okay.
it's not so often that you have somebody who's giving a talk and they leave.
No, but it's great. It gives a real feeling of proximity. Ele está falando que não é sempre que vocês têm alguém que está dando uma palestra que levanta e sai e volta. Eu vou sair para vocês poderem vê-lo. Okay.
This is very funny for me because I just pulled out. I've got something like, I don't know, 40 or 50 of these, which I do all my notes and my sketches and things. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but you know that slide I just showed you, this is it, but I did it by memory. So you can see the software there. That's the Nautilus, the cuttlefish, the squid and the octopus. And, you know, like I mentioned, the hardware from fixed to flexible. I obviously gave them that in the presentation. And then I talked about vibration. Look, there it is. And the other thing I did was I walked around the site, which is on the edge of the water. And I just thought it's kind of like what I say about listening to a site, looking at how other species adapt or tune in to the place. So I was looking at everything in the water, and just the way that the crustaceans like crabs and bivalve, which are, oh gosh, again, I should get you some shells and show you. Bivalve are 2 shells and they open like this. You'll see. I can't find exactly the one that I was after, but here are some examples. This is a mussel shell, and you can see there's 2 shells, and they have a ligament, the join, down the middle. But if you open this up, then it's kind of like that, if you can see that. So, of course, a shell is a very, very efficient structure, incredibly strong, and done with unbelievable minimal material. So that was kind of ambient in my head. And as I mentioned to you, I turned up with my aeroplane ticket. Have I got one here? Oh gosh, there's more. So, aeroplane ticket. Look at that, Air New Zealand. But what's really funny is on the flight, I wanted to explore how, I should show you just because it was flat, just like it was when I received it before I hopped in the plane. So in the plane, I wanted to illustrate to them at the meeting that, you know, we could do something like these shells in a very, very incredibly strong, simple way to give the rigidity as well as the lightness. Because in the earthquake, you want strength, but nothing heavy. You don't want heavy structures to fall on you in an earthquake. So I folded up these things and showed them and then passed it around. And obviously, that's what did the trick, and we won the competition. Yeah, it was a fascinating time because, gosh, I'd forgotten all of these things. I haven't looked at the sketchbook for a long, long time, but you can see there's some early sketches of it. The idea of how the space goes over the hall here, where the community come together, and then this mezzanine floor here for a dance studio upstairs and kitchens and things downstairs. So this idea of a shell on the edge of the estuary, learning from how other species have adapted to the place. As I mentioned, you know, shellfish and crabs and things. So anyway, if I go back to the slides, they seem to have, there we go. Thank you, Clarissa. So the next slide then, learning from the estuary, as I mentioned, and this is the site, and you can see all of the sea swirling around. So high tide and low tide are very different. It's very shallow. And I was walking around and I came across, there you are, the what are called Pippy shells. And you can see what's really interesting in that shell is the structure, the diagonals of the structure. So all of these photos are taken literally from the site. So out of that, I evolved this idea of the, as you can see, the airplane ticket and this vibration, but then made into a shell, which is following the pure structural diagram, so the forces of gravity and wind, and then making it into a series of components and prototyping these components so that we could see how they came together. Because all the components are triangular, it's quite difficult. You have very different relationships than if they were rectangular. And they're made at scale, they're huge. So the triangles are 1.2 meters wide and as much as 18 meters long and just 45 millimeters thick. This is a piece at 1-to-1 scale. So it gives you an idea. And they're laminations of roughly 1 millimeter. So these are peeled logs that are then glued in a great big huge long machine to give these big billets of timber. Amazingly strong. So we were constantly exploring together. So this is with the structural engineer, the builders, the entire design team, the service engineers, environmental engineers, all together. And using physical models to prototype and at the same time testing BIM platforms, so the digital model, which then has all of those ingredients in it, and you'll see that in a second. So now you're starting to see how woven structure creates woven space across different layers, like a carpet, of these warps. So that's kind of what you're looking through. We're standing, if you like, in the hall, looking across the atrium space and through into the third space where the kitchens and the cafe and then the dance studio are above. So here's the digital model, exploring the same things. And again, that's the cross section. And here is the service drawing and the structural drawing kind of together. You're looking at all the steel nodes which connect the timber pieces when they come together so that they can be screwed end on. So there's steel pieces that were specially made to connect all the triangles together. And here's the team. Again, the builders in the foreground closer to you, and the services engineer, our technical team. It's basically us, and you can see the drawings on the wall. And then we thought, well, we need to do this at full size. So this piece of the whole thing, we decided to prototype not just at, say, 1:50 or 1:20, but literally 1:1. And here it is. And we're looking at it, and we're looking at the tolerance and the fit and the finish of how everything comes together. Again, this is the team, the fabricators. So the steel fabricator, the timber fabricators, structural engineer, he's wearing the pink jacket, and the builders generally are kind of in their orange jackets, lining it all up with a laser, so it is millimeter perfect. And the tolerance which we managed to make this thing, even though it's all these crazy geometries, was only 3 millimeters across 30 meters. It gives you an idea. It's like kitchen joinery. So here it is at full scale. So that's 8.5 meters in the air. There it is. Everybody having a very good look at how everything comes together and how the nodes and the connections between the joints work or don't work. And pretty much everything was working except for one node, which we needed to re-engineer slightly in the prototype. But all the timber was fine, so we could reuse it actually in the real building. And now you're looking at the real building under construction. And if you look closely, you can see there's big concrete beams at the bottom where these very fine points, almost like stiletto heels of women's shoes, come down and land on the steel nodes, and they're all lined up and then dynabolted into the concrete beam. And that was done with a jig as well, so everything was absolutely millimeter perfect. And here's the final building. So you're in the main atrium space with the mezzanine on the left and the hall on the right. Here's the hall. So it's quite a different kind of space than the atrium space. Looking out across the estuary. There you are. How to reach ambient vibration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It was amazing. Okay, I'm just going to, because now they are making comments, and I'm just going to read and tell you. But thank you. It was wonderful listening to you. Let me see. Okay, no, Gustavo, it's the teacher that shares with me this this chair at the school, and he was saying that it made him think about the tectonic of the materials. He made the relationship with the architect with architect José Fernando. I don't know if you know, it's no doubt a Latin America, talking about the importance of the characteristics of the material, allowing an expression, a more total expression of the material, and not only its mere superficial application. So it's like so everybody is congratulating you.
That's a good point, because there's nothing added.
Okay.
That, I mean, that dimension, this is just 45 millimeters. And that's the structure. It's also the internal surface as well. This finish you can see on here is a fire retardant, which is not even a millimeter. And of course, you have to allow for a certain thickness for charring. So the actual structural dimension that was necessary was 30 millimeters. So you have 15 millimeter for charring, which is way better than concrete or steel. You know, so timber, if you design it well, will actually last better in a fire than either concrete or steel. That is probably not well known, but it's true.
Ok. O Chris está falando que a madeira, se for bem trabalhada, pode resistir melhor ao incêndio do que até o próprio concreto. Ele está falando que isso não é muito conhecido, mas que é verdade. So people saying that I think oh no, it's in Portuguese. So they really enjoyed, and they are writing some comments thanking you. It was great, really nice. I don't know if someone wants to Yeah. Namaste. No, it was nice to have the opportunity to be one morning in New Zealand, you know, experience this ambience there together.
You guys, I'm just going to lift the computer up so that you can
Okay.
see. Before I do, I wanted to say something else, because I was going to add some things about projects that I'm currently working on. And I mentioned to you, Clarissa, that I have a big inspiration, of course, from all my journeys to Brazil. And especially from, you'll laugh, because you sent me that note of this beautiful woman, Brazilian architect, and, you know, the wife of Redi, and how Carmen had this incredible influence, and maybe on the world scene less than in Brazil itself, that people had forgotten how important she was. Also, Radi's work, you know, it was their work. They were doing it together. And I'm talking about, of course, there are many projects, you know, the housing project that weaves like a almost Corbusian motorway, or the art gallery that is, you know, down on the beach, together with Bella Griffin. I mean, oh, hang on.
I'm going to just tell them a little bit of what you're saying. Ele, então, está falando da importância que teve para ele as visitas dele ao Brasil. Ele está falando do trabalho do Ride e da Carmen Portinho, que ele acha tão fundamental, né? E tão... aqui. Olha lá. Está mostrando o livro do Afonso Eduardo Ride, que ele fala que ele está estudando a arquitetura brasileira para um projeto novo que ele está fazendo. And Chris, I was going to... Então, ele mostrando para vocês o quanto para ele é importante a nossa arquitetura, né? Eu acho que isso é fundamental da gente ver, né?
This is a beautiful one too.
Dos livros dele, do Burle Marx e tudo. Ele me falou outro dia que ele ia voltar a estudar tudo. So, Chris, and what were you looking for? What do you look for when you study Brazilian architecture for your current project? What were you... Why Brazilian architecture between
I think that it's a very early example of organic, sustainable architecture. And by that, I mean, especially Bill Marx, and I mean architecture in the broader sense, you know, compositional at the scale of the city. So, I mean, one of the things I was just chatting about with the city council and my client yesterday, and the city of Pararua, because we're redesigning the waterfront and a series of projects. And I'm going to show you very quickly, because two things. You've seen this, Clarissa, but your students haven't.
Oh, no. I'm going to leave so they can see it better.
Okay. Now, watch this. As you go from this, which we were just talking about, to this is one of the projects. So this is what I'm busy with at the moment. Can you see that? It gives you a little idea of what's coming, but the water edge is very interesting and challenging. And to me, what Bill Marx was doing was really, really fascinating. Where did I put it? I suppose because the interrelation of water of urbanity, of even being a plantsman, you know, that he understood the plants. He walked into raw nature and discovered and explored and then built up his, you know, the old coffee mansion that he lived in, and then created these plantations which allowed him to be able to take these plants to the new places and the projects, whether they were in Rio or in Brasilia or any of the other places that he worked. And I suppose the dance with existing sites and the existing nature and the introduction of new nature, a kind of weaving in a way. I find Bill Marx's work just fascinating, and as I said, Ray D as well, and of course there are many others, but it's this embracing of nature, this and you can see that where I live is also very three-dimensional, just like the Brazilian landscape is very three-dimensional, especially Rio. Wellington is, well, we're on fault lines, so, you know, I suppose the equivalents that might be easier to understand for you are, say, Italy or Japan. But New Zealand has earthquakes all the time, and our land is very mountainous. and the sea and the winds is, everything is, nature is very powerful here. Let's put it that way. So that's what I love about Brazil. I think that it's always been felt like a second home to me.
Great, Chris. So we really have to find a way to bring you here sometime, back to your second home.
I would love to.
In person. But thank you for sharing so much with us. I really knew it was going to be like that if I invited you to talk to us. And I think it's great because it helps making people dream. And I think that's what we need now.
We need to build our dreams.
Yes, true.
Or weave them.
Ok, great. I'm going to translate that. Eu estou falando que o que ele trouxe para a gente é exatamente o que eu queria, que ele trouxesse essa generosidade, né, essa visão generosa dele, tão ligada com o mundo, né, e cheia de positividade, na verdade, né? E eu falei para ele que eu quero isso que eu queria que ele fizesse, nos fizesse sonhar. E ele falou assim, fizesse construir os nossos sonhos. E isso é fundamental, né? A gente trabalhar para construir os nossos sonhos, né? Que é o trabalho dele. Então era isso, gente. Eu estou falando que uma hora a gente tem que dar um jeito de trazer ele aqui. Eu acho que seria muito bom. Chris, thank you 1,000 times. It was great. Thank you very much, and let's stay in touch and see if we can organize other nice things together and with the school and so on. And thank you for all that you has given to us. Only one question from Gustavo, one last question. He's asking if you think that this capacity to relate to space in this sensible and sensitive way is a real key in the formation of contemporary architecture and of the contemporary architect. Was I able to translate that? No.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
It's very clear. It's very clear.
Okay.
We have a huge challenge because many people think at the moment, I'll just put this back a little bit. Many people think at the moment that we need to be efficient and we need to do things fast. And so it's all about scale. I'm not so sure. I think that, you know, I talked about the coffee cup and how one man can do all of that. And that's about knowing your craft really well and working well at the scale of the human being. I think that we need to do things well. That's what we need to do. And we need to craft them out of good material. It is like making food. If the ingredients are good and there is love and knowledge or skill in the making, then the food will be good. If the ingredients are bad and you're making lots of it, like McDonald's, it's a disaster at scale. You know, all of you know that the best food is done, number one, by mama, number two, by yourself. So, you know, like the best architecture, like Thoreau showed us, is that when you respond yourself to the specific place. When we make things a little bit bigger, houses that are a little bit bigger, like say the Sydney Opera House, of course it's more complex, but the genius of Utzon, the architect of the Sydney Opera House, is how to do that with elegance and with economy in a unique response to the place. So I think making mass housing, just rolling it out as an industrial process is crazy. That is turning us all into automatons. Everybody then just becomes a product. And that's one of the biggest problems of the computer age, is we're being turned into products. We've got to stop that. It's crazy. Do things by hand. It's much better. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I think it was great. It gives us a lot to think about. I'm just going to say, because I didn't finish writing, so então ele estava dizendo que ele acha que a gente fazer tudo pelos computadores e pensar nessa grande escala e produzir tudo assim na velocidade, sem qualidade, não está gerando coisas boas no mundo. E aí o que ele falou, vamos fazer as coisas com as nossas próprias mãos. Funciona melhor. Ele terminou assim. Tá bom. Okay, Chris, I was just translating. Thank you very, very much again. I think you probably need to go, and it was very nice to have you. And
thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
and I wish you all inspiration.
Ok, thank you. Ele está desejando um bom dia para todo mundo e desejando também inspiração para todos vocês. Ok, thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.
Tá bom.
Tchau.
Tchau.
Tchau. Bye. Bye.